Welcome everyone to another Horus Heresy kit bash. So tonight I'm going to be making a Apothecary, and I'm going to use it for my Alpha Legion, and I'm going to try to make it as universal as possible because Alpha Legion could be in any Legion. So this one's not going to be just for the Lodge members, this is going to be for Loyalist and Traitor alike. So I could make this guy look like he's carving somebody to bits in an aggressive way, but I want to make it a traditional looking apothecary. Maybe 1 foot on top of a body, who has a massive hole after the gene seed has been removed. That kind of pose. You know what I'm talking about. Now, the Primaris have a gorgeous apothecary in 40k. And that kit has several bits which you could kit bash into other apothecaries. So, for example, it comes with this lovely piece that I have remaining from my previous set. So I've made a Primaris apothecary in the past. This specifically comes from the Conquest box. And yeah, you can imagine that on the power pack. So that would be perfect for an apothecary. Also, what's perfect for apothecary is the helmet that comes with. So with a little bit of customization, you can see the apothecary symbol on top. And yes, this is a Primaris gun that has an apothecary symbol on it, but I'm going to convert this to a custom Vocite charger. So I've got the Vocite support squad, the tactical support squad, and inside I do like my Vocite chargers. So the chargers are basically the assault variant, so they get the 2 shots rather than the heavy variant. But there's a few bits left over. If, like me, you don't use the heavy weapons, you're going to keep that for a heavy weapons squad, funny enough. There's a few little bits like that for the heavy Vocite. That'll fit nicely underneath. Just so. It straddles nicely. Yes, I use the word straddle. And also the tip of the heavy Vocite as well. Just so happen to have the sprue on me here. So you can see just there if the camera ever focuses. Couple of those stuck back to back and cut the tip off that pistol. So he's going to have a custom Vocite charger. But you can arm your apothecary in any way you like. He can have a bolt pistol to keep that cost right down. I personally obviously using the Vocite charger. The bolt pistol obviously is free. The Vocite charger is 2 points. I think that's a steal. I know you want to keep your points down for your apothecary, but for 2 points, a Vocite is an additional strength, has a bit more range, and it has 2 shots. It also has Defragate, which means any unfailed wounds, you roll that many dice, and they can potentially take that many wounds again. So this guy is only going to fire 2 shots, so he's not going to be taking on squads, you know. But for 2 points, why not? It's only 2 points. So if you can make your whole list and you've got 2 points left over, I thoroughly recommend it. Also, to keep the cost down, most people will be using a chainsword. But me personally, I want this guy to have a little bit of a punch. Chainsword's fine. It's strength user. It's got reroll on the wounds, which is really nice. But 9 times out of 10, it is only strength 4, being on Marines. So I like the Charbonneau weapons. In fact, the Tabar is one of my personal favourites. It looks a bit more Space Wolfy, it's basically a power axe. A Tabar is an axe, and I'm going to be using, obviously once again from my bits box, good old kit bash session, a power axe. I didn't want to make it too leery. But I thought that would be pretty cool. The reason I take these, A, for coolness, but also has breaching. So basically, if you roll a 6, it's now AP2 weapon, and it has duelist edge. So if someone goes after you in a challenge, you basically get +1 to the initiative. It also has strength +2, which is pretty damn decent. So if you're going against regular troops, you're wounding on 3s. Even against elite troops, you're wounding on 3s. The strength +2, possibly not necessary. +1 would be perfectly fine. But I just wanted this guy to look a little bit cooler. I will probably magnetize the wrist so I can swap out if I wanted to put a power sword in there, or possibly even a chainsword to keep the cost down, because it is 10 points. Taking the model to a whole 57 points for one model, which I don't think is too bad. This guy's going to be joining a unit. I'm probably going to put artificer armor on there, so rather than the standard power armor. So that will take it to 67 points. So if you're going to do that, maybe not take the axe, maybe just take a chainsword. And this guy, if he joins a unit, chances are he's going to be one of the last models for you to remove from a unit. Unless someone's shooting you with the sniper ability, I basically just want to make this guy look cool. So I'm going to give him the axe, and I'm going to magnetize it so later on, future-proofing, I can swap out for the chainsword or even the power sword. I personally probably am not going to be using apothecaries in a unit, mainly because it does take up an elite slot. And me personally, I like my Contemptor Dreadnoughts, I like my regular Terminators, and I like my Specialist Alpha Legion Terminators. And with the Alpha Legion special rule, I do like taking the Guy of War back. But that's just me personally. So that's 4 different types of elite. Putting 5 in there is not going to happen. So I could possibly take out my Specialist Alpha Legion Terminators, have a 10-man Cataphracti unit, and put the Apothecary in. Keep them alive a bit longer. Because that unit is over 400 points. So you want to keep those 400 point units alive. What do I mean by that? Apothecary, for those who don't know, basically issue a 5-up feel no pain to the unit it's joined. So any wounds suffered, roll a d6 on a 5 and a 6, it stops a wound, which I think is pretty nice. So enough about the rules, let's kitbash the hell out of this mother. So we've talked about the gun, we've talked about the weapon options, and we've got the cool drill on its back. So the real question you want to ask yourself is, do you want Mark IV, so Betrayal of Calf style, or the Mark 6s from the new kits? I'm going to go with the Mark IV. I do have quite a few Mark 6 torsos kicking around, and I'm going to go with the classic Mark IV legs. So you can see it's still chunks of sprue on there. I'm going to go with the standard shoulder pads, not any bumpy bumpies. You can always green stuff the Apothecary symbol on the shoulder pad, so it would be on its right hand shoulder. So if you're looking right at it, it would be the left hand shoulder. And then you get some arm options. So what kind of shape arms do you want? Do you want it so the pistol is poking out the side, so he's aiming at somebody, or would you like him in a kind of more relaxed stance? It's totally up to you. But there's plenty of arm options out there. So you can have one pointing out straight in front of him, which I find a bit static, and the axe hanging down to one side. Or you can even have the axe up to the chest, or you can get an arm so he is using the axe and the pistol is relaxed. So it's totally up to you. So I will show you what I'm doing when I build my Apothecary. So I started assembling torso this guy. I've stuck on his Apothecary gear. When the glue's fully dry, I will probably trim up a little bit there just to tidy it up a little bit. Now Apothecaries often also have these drill kind of things on the back of the forearm, but this particular model, I thought that was cool, and that was probably enough by itself. To have one on the back of the arm as well, yeah, possibly. I have converted one for 40k before with one of the servitor arms that has a drill. That was pretty cool. Bit of bionic servo drill. This is the custom Volkite. The glue is fully dry. I'll trim up the magazine, the ammo mag. And this guy I started assembling. I'm going to bevel and cut part of his back off, stick to the base and drill a nice hole in his chest so the Apothecary is taking out his gene seed and standing above him. I also think it's a good idea to stick the head on models where you want them to actually face, which is always a bonus. So you can see his torso's slightly angled towards his front foot there. And I'm going to stick his head looking pretty much in the same direction. And I know his gun will be elevated slightly as well. So I want to stick his head in the same way as his tools is facing. Now I noticed the Primaris heads are very similar to the Mark IV Space Marine heads. So the same nose piece, same little V underneath the nose, the little mouthpiece there. So I thought that was very good. So, and it's the same scale as well, even though it is Primaris. Now I have a lot of vehicles for the Heresy that I've yet to put together, but this sprue is quite popular. It seems to be on a lot of vehicles, from the Spartan to the Predator to the Rhino. I'm not going to use them all. I've only assembled the Rhino so far. I didn't use this sprue. It's a lovely sprue. So many different hatch options. But these arms here, they don't look like anything too special once you put the shoulder pad over. But it's a Mark III set of arms, and I really like them because that hand down on the underside, like a green stuff, a gland or something. Also sorts out the magnetizing option of the different weapons, and it looks more like the Primaris version. So he's standing there with his hand slightly cupped, facing upwards. So you could put a gland or something in there, make it look nice and gory, like he's just extracted it from this dead Marine on the base. Plus, the Mark IIIs almost look like a metallic glove. So they almost look like surgeon's gauntlets, but Space Marine-ified. So I'm going to cut these out, and I'm going to use these instead. So Mark III arms on a Mark IV body. This guy really is a veteran. Okay, so the Marine on the base, I have drilled a small hole in his chest with a pin drill, and roughed up the surrounding edges with a knife just to make it look semi-cracked, semi-serrated. After all, it shouldn't be easy to drill into power armor, right? So I've made it look like it was a real effort, even with surgeon's tools, to get in there and get that gene seed. And I've cut him at such an angle, and it's best to use a hobby saw. I will pan back a little bit so you can see the hobby saw, because it gives a nice flat straight edge. It's serrated and you can control it. Yes, it's slightly thicker than a Stanley knife blade, but a lot more control, decent grip, so you aren't going to force a knife through it and slip and damage yourself. Of course, I'm always using a cutting mat as well, but yeah, hobby saw is a really nice bit, especially for converting, chopping miniatures and terrain. I use it a lot when I'm doing something like Necromunda terrain, something like that, needing to cut a gantry. It looks bad because you're using a saw on a miniature, but believe me, it's a lot more control than using a knife. So that's what I've done with this guy. I've just beveled him slightly. I've cut the wrist, so he's holding the palm upturned, so he is not perfectly flat, but a bit more of an angle, so he could possibly look at what's in his hand. And I've started cutting the leg here, because I want a Will Riker-esque pose with his foot standing on the marine, because he needs a bit of purchase when he was drilling that marine, pulling out the gene seed. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to start sticking these bits to the base and start working on my pose. Okay, so that's the final pose, I think. So I'll get my grubby little hand behind so it focuses a little bit better. So as you can see, the marine is on the base, hole in the chest, and I want to do a bit of a heroic pose. So like I said, I cut the leg and just moved it very, very slightly. So the gun is resting on the thigh, because it's a heavy gun, even for a marine with one hand, I'm sure. I've done a scruffy bit of almost like a tarp rather than the usual cloth between the legs, because I want to look like it's the Horus Heresy, so they're going to be a bit war torn, a bit beaten in the trenches. So more like a butcher's apron, and I'm going to make it as such. When I paint it up, I'm going to make it nice and grubby. I've green stuffed the Apothecary symbol there, but you can get quite a few kits with Apothecary pads out there, so 40k ones will do. But yeah, I got the head looking in the same direction as the hand, and I don't know if it will focus on the hand, but I used a gene stealer gland as a gland. There you go. Didn't see that coming, did you? So the gene seed is basically a gland, and I cut this Tyranid one up, just stick it on his hand like so. So I'm hoping making it look a bit pinky-fied, and then lots of blood for the blood god all around the hand. I've put some Primaris pouches on, mainly because they're round, and I think that would look more like a medical tube or something would be inside, being round. But here it is. I mean, the conversion worked quite well for the Volkite weapon. Of course, I could have just used the Volkite weapon, cut that symbol off, or been very good with green stuff and sculpted it. It's got a little bit of green stuff to do there on the back of the hand where it meets the gauntlet, because that hand normally straddles a slot. That's the second time I said straddle. That's a thing. So yeah, a little bit of a hole there, so I put a little bit of green stuff in to fill it in. But I wanted this guy to look a bit more epic because he's an apothecary. I wanted to have him on a bit better base. So his back is still relatively straight because I have elevated one side of the base, and he's standing on the marine because I wanted it to look like he is stood on the marine with one foot to get purchased to rip the gene seed out. It's a falling brother. It's not just him murdering somebody, and I do like the drill on the back. But there's so many different apothecary type bits out there. Like I said, the Primaris helmet is rather similar to the Mark IV, so I thought I would base this guy on Mark IV, using Mark III arms because they look more gauntlet-y, look more like they're a medical glove is what I was thinking, so small little nods to things like that. And that one there, I've just cut the wrist so he's facing furthermore skyward. So for this particular kit, not that you guys will probably want to build the exact same one, but it's just a video on ideas. I have used a Mark IV kit. I've used the Primaris Apothecary. I've used a little bit of Primaris, as in the pouches, but any pouches will do. I just preferred the round one, so it looks like he's got medical containers in. And that's it, basically. A Mark IV kit, Primaris kit, a bit of green stuff, and it looks pretty cool. But ideas often flow while making things like this, because originally I was thinking about actually modelling it with the axe. And I mean, you can use obviously an axe, you can use a power sword, you can use a glaive, chainsword, and a few other little weapons like that. You can have a bolt pistol, obviously the Volkite, things like that. So that's the rules. But parts wise, it's totally up to your imagination. Do you want to base it on a Mark IV? The Mark V is a mishmash of loads of different armours. You can have the Mark III, because there's a nice squad box of Mark III out for the Heresy. Same with 4s if you can get hold of them, because they're in Calf and they're quite popular. And obviously currently 6s are everywhere. 6s, I think they look a bit bulkier. So, you know, if you want to make them look a bit meaner, a bit bigger, not a problem. And the stuff I've got on the base is basically cork with a little bit of Never Leave Home Without It, Vallejo Thick Mud Acrylic. So this one is grey looking, because I didn't really care about what colour it's going to be, because I will eventually paint it up and make it look quite weathered anyway. So weathering powders. But there is loads of different thick muds from Vallejo. So it's all diorama effects. You can have the grey industrial like that. There's obviously mud looking ones. So when it says thick mud, you can actually have a browny one. There's more yellowy tinges and things like that. But it's a great basing product. My whole Alpha Legion army is going to be that gooped onto the base. And when it dries, and it dries fairly fast, but it can be sped up with a hairdryer, I'm then just going to use a load of weathering powders, make it look a bit more Martian, I think. But yeah, there is my Apothecary. Feel free to show me your conversions, put it up on the House of Chaos community page on Facebook. I would really like to see your paint schemes for your Apothecaries or any other Space Marine or any other miniature you have. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you liked where this guy ended up and you enjoyed the journey. Stay safe, everyone. Catch you in the next video.